In this video, we're going to complete the edge roller, and we're going to take you through a bunch of the steps that it takes to make it. River Valley Leather was pretty stoked for their new roller, and it all starts with making the sheet of plastic. Outside of the barbecue. Now, I'm mainly doing this for two reasons out in the barbecue here. One reason I've been banished from the kitchen. I've been doing projects in the kitchen and getting in trouble. And second, this is probably going to create a bit of a stink, so we're going to want to keep that outside. Okay, I just checked it, and we are exactly where we're supposed to be with this. You can kind of shape it and mold it and whatever you want there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this plate up here. Now the plate's still a little bit warm, so I got to be careful I don't burn myself here. Make sure I get all of the schmoo and what have you out from underneath there. I'm going to get a nice flat surface. Let's spin this plate around. That'll be even better. All right. Grab that there. I'm going to lay it out nice and flat. We're just going to gently push down on it and let it cool. Hopefully that plate's not too hot. It sticks to it. There we go. This is good. All right. Now I'm going to crank everything on high because there's going to be some residual plastic that's going to be kind of floating around in there, just the smell of it. We're going to burn her on high, 450, 500 for probably about 20 minutes, and it'll burn all that residual carbon out of there. And then we'll give it a good cleaning before we use that barbecue again. Okay, now this is cooled off. Let's lift this up here and have a quick look at it. We've got ourselves a pretty good sheet of plastic here that we can actually work with. I've got a few minor defects on the outside from the grill. I got a little bit hot, but to be honest, I'm pretty sure right through here, we can cut some good sections out of that. And the next time we do this, we'll just be a little more careful with it. Okay, so we're down in the woodworking room. Let's draw this out so it makes a little bit more sense for you. We machined the wheel in the last video. As you can remember, that's going to fit in the tray. And then we're going to use some ABS pipe connections, as you see here, where it's going to actually have the dish. Then we're going to put some sidewalls on it with the V's in it that this actual roller is going to run in. And then we're just going to build the structure around everything and give it a test. So some pros and cons of working with plastic. The pros are it's super cheap and abundant everywhere, and you can use woodworking tools to pretty much shape it into whatever you want. Now the drawbacks are though is it does off-gas a little bit while you're cutting it. And it does get a little bit melty that you have to kind of kick a burr off of it. So I do suggest you do this in a well-ventilated area. Oh, and I did run into a bit of a problem when I was ripping the pipe in the table saw. It does kind of want to grab, so I had to be very careful with that. Now I'm going to cut the V-grooves into the side plate, and I'm actually going to trim those up by hand and kind of smooth them out so they rolls really nice a little bit later. I think to do this again, it probably would have been a little bit better if I'd actually kind of welded those plastic plates together, and then they would have been just perfect, exactly the same. Now remember I said you could use woodworking tools in all this? The hand plane is actually a really good tool in all this because it's going to really beautify a bit of your edges and give it that real professional look. And not only that, is you can kind of put a little bit of a V-groove in it just before you weld it. Now on the pipe connection, I had a bit of writing that I had to cut off just because I wanted to have a really good fit on there. And then I'm actually going to put a big chamfer on the sides of this because I want to make sure I get a really, really good weld to the sidewalls. Now let's put it all together and make sure everything's oriented right. And then we'll grab the C-clamp and we'll clamp this all together. This is a very important step actually, because the fitment of this is going to dictate how this is going to operate later. Because if those V-grooves aren't lined up just perfect, that roller is going to be rubbing on one of the walls or kind of just running funny, and you're never going to be able to get your wiper quite straight on it. So I definitely slowed down at this step to make sure that it was all going to be going together properly. So one of my new favorite toys from Princess Auto, don't worry, this isn't affiliated or anything like that, I'm not sponsored, is the plastic welding kit. Now this gives you the ability to basically grab regular stuff from Home Hardware or Home Depot or wherever you get it from and build stuff out of it and weld it together. So I hope this video today is giving you some really good ideas. So let's tack this together and start using this cool tool. Now just to tack weld it in there, I'm just going to drive it up top and then push the plastic down on it. That'll give me a bit of a tack weld on there. Now I'm going to bolt this to the table so it doesn't kind of run away on me. And as you see here, on the end of the tool, I actually put the filler rod through the hole of the tip, and then I kind of feed it together in kind of a ballet of welding. If you do wind up getting the same tool, I definitely suggest you kind of start playing with a little bit on some scrap plastic and practice a little bit before you start doing it. It's not a hard skill, but once you actually kind of catch on to it, you can make it look really, really good. Now, filling in that V-groove that we cut earlier on that pipe is going to give us the best chance of success here. It's going to give us probably about an 1/8 inch of contact between the two surfaces and actually properly bond them together. Later on, you're going to see me weld the side, and I'll get into that a little bit later in the video on why that's okay, but not as good of a weld. I'd actually like to get like a professional welding kit. I mean, this one's good, don't get me wrong, but on a professional plastic welding kit, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there's almost like a shark fin on the other side that's actually contacting, and it goes into the plastic and kind of, I don't know, stir welds it, and it gives you a bit of a deeper penetration. But you know what, for the stuff that we're doing in the shop here, this is going to work quite well. Okay, so the next step that we got in here is I've got the exact same width as everything here. I'm just going to heat this gun up here. I'm just going to create a couple tack welds on there. So by doing the tack weld, I'm actually going to come up here on the top once I get it up to temperature, and then I'm just going to push down onto it and kind of smear it in together. Or the bottom, kind of push it up. Let's do that. That kind of worked good. I'm going to push down, come up, come over here. I'm going to push down on that. Push down, kind of smear it upwards. That should go pretty good there. Be nice to get a little bit more in there. So let's do the same there. Let's go push down in there, up into there. Push down there, up into there. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different this time because I want a better product on this one here. So I'm actually just going to do a drag kind of method. Create a big groove in there. Now I'm just learning as I'm going here, so there's no specific technique that I know how to do. So if you have a better technique that you know of to weld plastic, I'd really like to hear about it. Throw it in the comments below, and that way we can all kind of learn from each other. Now that I got that groove in there, Jesus, I'm making a mess of this. Now I'm just going to fill that groove right back in there. Let's try that again, but we'll do it a little bit better here. Now, I guess I could have probably ground that or filed that or machined that. This is probably going to do a little preheat cycle before I do it. So now I'm just going to drag this tip in there all the way down, making sure to get a good weld on that, good plastic weld. And this is just going to be on the surface. So So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to drag the knife on here quick, take a lot of those machining marks off from the bandsaw, just to give it a bit more of a pretty look. Now I'll just break these corners here. Let's heat this up here and weld this on. Now, from here on in, pretty much everything is going to be the same as I've showed you before. We just kind of tack it in place, and then we just weld the surface to keep it on. Now, if I was really worried about this being a structural thing, I would have welded it really, really deep. But it's not really structural, and we're just looking for a pretty look here. After all, this is only the part that's going to hold on the scraper. The most beautiful part about this project here is its simplicity. I mean, really, it's just a bunch of plastic that's flattened out. And then, I mean, even this piece here, it's just a quarter of a connection piece cut. And then I just weld it in, and it almost looks factory. Let's move on to making the wiper. And I bet you're wondering what I'm going to make that red wiper out of. Well, that's right. Sometimes simplicity is key. I mean, this plastic's readily available, and it's everywhere. It doesn't matter what it came from. It's what it's going to turn into. And I mean, hey, in the end grand scheme of things, I'm not going to tell anyone what I made the lid out of. It's just between you, I, and the internet, right? Now all we have to do is figure out how we're going to fit this onto here. I'm thinking the most easy solution is probably putting a 10 mil bolt right about there, and then bolting this all down. And we'll probably cut a slot down that red wiper so that we can move it back and forth as we need it, as it wears. Let's mark this out roughly where we're going to drill it, and then we're going to take it out to the shop, and we're actually going to drill and tap into that plastic. Now remember I said we're going to put a 10 mil bolt in there, and the proper drill size for a 10 mil bolt is a number 9 drill. A number 9 is 196 thou for those that don't know that, so close is probably good. And since it's plastic, you could probably go a little bit smaller on the smaller side because you're not going to be too worried about breaking that tap. Now we're going to do a little bit of a cheat here. We're going to throw this other part on top. I don't really recommend doing this because the under part actually moved, and I just put a little nick in the part below, and it's really not desirable. We got away with it, and lucky for me, we're going to throw a tap in here and tap through it, and it'll cover up that little mistake. Now power tapping with plastic is pretty easy. I'm just going to burp just like we would with steel. I'm just going to burp the head, and then I'm just going to let it coast through its work. We're never putting a lot of pressure downward on anything. And now, to take it out, I'm going to lift it up a little bit, and once again, just burp it and let it work its way out. Ideally, I would have probably kept that a little bit more level, because it might have cut the threads a little bit looser, but it turns out we're pretty fine here, and that's okay. Now, experience has told me that I'm going to need to hold this little piece in the milling machine vise, because if you don't, it's going to turn into a little ninja star or nunchuck and start flying around the shop, or cutting fingers and stuff. Now remember, this is a piece that needs to go a little bit bigger, because this is going to actually be kind of like a washer on top of that wiper. Now, full disclaimer, originally the plan was actually to have that stud come up through the bottom, and then put a T-nut on top, but we had to change that a little bit, because I got my height a little bit too high for that roller, and that T-nut was going to start interfering with the actual rolling system. So instead, we're going to take it all apart, and we're actually going to have that come down through the top. Now what we're going to do here is I'm just going to cut right along each side. I'm going to kind of create a T-slot for this wiper. Now the purpose of this here is, as this wiper wears, Jeremy's going to take this apart, take a ruler, and cut off the edges that wear on this wiper, and then he's going to want to adjust it upwards. If we had just drilled a simple hole, it wouldn't want to move up and down whatsoever. So as for adjusting the wiper, it's pretty simple. I pushed it right up against where it should be, and then I'll give it a bit of a spin, and wherever it's contacting, I'll just kind of tilt it just a little bit to pull it off of the wheel. Now that we got it all built up, the proof's in the pudding. Let's take it over to River Valley Leather and give it a whirl and see if it works. I have to say, this is probably one of the most rewarding jobs I've done in a long time. To go over to see another craftsman using the tool that I built. I mean, this guy is really good at what he does. and he couldn't resist painting everything he had on his table. And I know for sure this is going to get him caught up with
Fantastic.
all of the projects that he has in the loom. If you like this video, you're probably going to like this other video up in the left-hand corner I've got here. Or if you want to check out River Valley Leatherworks Instagram account, check out the notes below. I have a link for you there, and you can see some of the cool stuff that he's working on.